Good morning. A warm welcome to the Humanist Community in Silicon Valley Sunday Forum. My name is Alex Havasi. I'm a member of the Humanist Community. The Humanist Community, slow down, is a chapter of the American Humanist Association. Humanism is a secular and reality-based philosophy of life that affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. We value freedom, health, happiness, fairness, compassion, and using science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. Please aid us to continue to present these forums by donating to the Humanist Community. You can find out to donate to our organization, as well as find out a listing of all our events on our website, which is www.humanist.org. Today, Zem Laski will talk. Zem is a member of the Humanist Community who says he hates to travel. He's politically savvy and observant and has a cynical sense of humor. In July, he returned to Poland, where he grew up under that country's communist regime. This Sunday, he'll tell us what he observed, what has changed and what has not changed there. Also, exquisite confectionery will be served for those of us here.
Yes.
All right, Zem.
So anywho, thank you for coming virtually and literally. I went to Poland last month for just 6 days. And I've actually been back since the fall of communism. So it's not true that I went there like for the first time, but every time I go, things change a little bit. Last time I went was right before COVID, I think in 2020. So it has been a while. And once we agreed that I will do this talk, I discovered that I lost all my pictures. I combed through my cellular phone. Maybe they're somewhere. I'm still searching on my hard drive as we speak because it's a big hard drive at home. So I don't have any of my pictures, but that's okay. I found other pictures online actually that maybe even be more interesting than my pictures. At first I thought of canceling, but then Alex already sent the emails out, and then Alex will be forced to do, shadow puppets on the screen if I didn't do this. So let's give it a try. So this was my trip. I went from SFO to Gdańsk. I had to change planes in the Third Reich because there is no direct connection. And I guess I flew a total of 20,000 kilometers and change. By the way, a fun fact, it's very difficult to get Google Maps to draw a geodesic projection of your flight. It would draw like a straight line, Oh, by the way, there's a laser pointer that is supposed to work. Is it working?
Oh, you have to do it with the cursor on the screen.
Yeah.
You can't see that.
Okay, that sucks. Okay, anyhow, Google just draws a straight line between the source and destination, which is not the way people travel. So anywho, this is Gdańsk. This is the way it looked like in the 1980s. And that's about a right size airport. It's the size of maybe an elementary school. There are like maybe 3 cars parked. This is the way the communists built it in, I think, 1974, if not mistaken. That's when they built it. They changed it a little bit. Right now it looks like this. I would say it's probably half the size of San Jose, more or less. It's pretty humongous. Like with a rail connection and everything. This is what it looks like inside. So it's extremely different from the communist version that I kind of have a longing for anyway. Next to the airport is a huge Intel campus that they've been building over the years. And I remember these buildings here in the distance, but this is towards the front of you. There is the new Intel campus. I guess all of it is an Intel campus. I mean, they're typically Intel buildings. They're completely devoid of charm. They're just like the buildings in Santa Clara. They're boxes basically, but they have 2,500 people in there. Although Intel is running into some financial problems, so now they're saying they might lay some people off. So, okay, that's enough airport. So now this is, I'm showing you Apple Maps here, and I marked a few points of interest. So on the right-hand side, the red arrow points to Westerplatte. That's where World War II began. That's where the German destroyer, the Schleswig-Holstein, started shooting at the Polish military outpost that was situated there. So this is typically thought of as the canonical beginning of the World War II in Europe, at least. Then the arrow to the left, and I really hate the fact that this pointer doesn't work, is the Ronald Reagan Airport Park. You can go to a Ronald Reagan Park that they have right by the beach there. You know, they like Ronald Reagan over there, and for a good reason, I think. And then finally, at the bottom, the arrow at the bottom points at the Gdańsk University of Technology, where I attended 3 semesters, which is why I'm such an expert in electrical engineering and computer science. So, you know. Okay, one of you. Okay. So anywho, so this is that. Now you can see the path that Apple Maps hopefully drew for me. And actually, most of my talk will be not about Gdańsk, but about Sopot, which is the town. You see the name of it right at the top. That's actually where I grew up. It's a resort town. It's a seaside resort, which is quite swanky, at least by Polish standards. So here, and this is I tip my hat off to drone flyers. Someone finally took a drone photo which captures everything that I want to capture. So right in front, you see these beautiful postmodernistic communist buildings, like these 10-story buildings. I grew up in one of them. And then there's this horizontal building right behind. That used to be my elementary school. Now it's an old folks home. When I lived there, the city had 50,000 residents. Now it has 37,000. If you look towards the distance, way at the top of the screen, you see like a little pier. I mean, it is, I don't know if you can tell that it is a pier right on the coastline there. This is the Baltic coast, the Bay of Gdańsk, to be more precise. And this is maybe like a 2-kilometer distance. It's not more than a mile, actually, just walking distance. It's all very compressed. So here, I took advantage of the drone people. So now we're flying towards the coastline. So this is like the main drag in Sopot, where truckloads of tourists show up in the summertime. I really picked the wrong time to go there. Okay, now we're getting even closer. So now we're, you can see the pier very clearly. And this is, sort of, there's like a little springs or some sort of a, what do you call it when you have like springs and people go to for a curative spa, but not a physical spa, like when you drink mineral water and that kind of thing. What do you call that?
That's a spa.
That's also a spa. Okay, well then, that's
It's a place to drink mineral water.
okay. That's what I thought. So anywho, so now you have the photograph from the other side. So yeah, and I have, this is like blocking everything.
I can move it. You don't like that thing being there?
I don't like anything being there. Well, that's zoom. So here you have 2 arrows. The top small arrow is where we started. It's the hood where I grew up. And if you look in this direction, you can also kind of sort of see it. But this bigger arrow is the Grand Hotel, the storied Grand Hotel. At least it's storied for me. And it's famous for a lot of people who stayed there over the years. And why is this not working now?
What do you want to do?
Oh, because I used the mouse, I guess, and it froze.
What do you want to do?
Flip the slide forward. Actually, no. Let me try the mouse then. Okay, this will work. So this is the Grand Hotel. It's it's very majestic. It's 100 years old. There was a movie made a few years ago called the Grand Budapest Hotel. I wonder if they based it off of that, because it looked kind of like this. And it's famous for the guests that stayed there over the years. The most famous one being Charles de Gaulle. He was there in 1967. Actually had a very long trip in Poland, like 7 days, I think, which is very long for a head of state. And I just had to share a couple of funny slides that I found. Here is him being greeted, I assume, at the airport. And you have very different signs, like, the western border is inviolate, you shouldn't mess with it. Inviolate. But the thing, the red arrow here is a Wheel of Fortune moment. Can you complete the phrase? It's the red sign is kind of obscured by this one, but can you figure out what it says? It's a political puzzle.
Israel?
Very good. Okay. Okay. So you can't play Wheel of Fortune. It says Israel is the aggressor. Okay, this is 1967, after the 6-Day War. So obviously, this is when all the communist states, with the exception of Romania, broke off diplomatic relations with Israel. And it didn't go back until 1989. So Israel's the aggressor. And actually, I read up on it, and it's true. Israel struck first. And it's a good case of why preventive warfare is sometimes justified, something that Michael and I argue about constantly during our meetings. So then we go to the next one. This is funny. This is a motorcade, but just to go. But the middle one, you see the hammer and sickle, see, and it says 50 years because this was the 50th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, right? That's the shit that's important, people. It's the Bolshevik Revolution, 1967. And I also found a slide of de Gaulle going to church. So when he told the communists he wants to go to church, they were a little nonplussed initially, but then they let him do it. So there's de Gaulle in church. One more de Gaulle. So people were, it was just nuts. People just, crawled up, electrical poles. And like you can see, my mother says, she claims that, when the motorcade was passing by, she waved to him and he waved back. At the time, I was a fetus, so I didn't wave. But I suspect this experience scarred me in some way, in a way that I can't figure out. But here is on the right is the monument of de Gaulle that they put up in Warsaw. The red arrow points at the building behind, which is the old headquarters of the Polish Communist Party. So it's a very, very, very apropos, actually, because we recently learned about de Gaulle that he actually was okay with handing off Eastern Europe to Stalin. Even made an agreement with him. So I'm waiting for this monument to come down. I don't know what the over-under is, how many years, but it's coming down. Okay, this is another guest at the Grand Hotel, very famous. He stayed there for, I think, 3-4 days in September of '39. It was a working vacation. He was traveling to the front because the Germans trying to take Warsaw, and actually took them like a month to do. It was not easy, but eventually they did it. And this was his headquarters for a while. But there were more people. There, this I just found out recently. There's Marlene Dietrich, Greta Garbo, Henry Kissinger for some reason, Fidel Castro thrice, and he apparently gave the the staff hell when he was there. He gave him the little caliente, Cubano flavor. Mohammed Reza Pahlavi, aka the Shah. This was in 1977. I actually remember seeing it in the newspaper as a kid. They had a picture of him in the newspaper, and he had 2 years to go at this point, So looks very nice here. Omar Sharif. It's the stupidest picture I could find, so I had to use it. Aboniem, which probably most of you don't know. Heinrich Himmler. Boniem is let's see if I can go back. This was like a disco group in the late 1970s, and Michael should know them because Brezhnev was a big fan, and he invited them to the USSR, and they did a tour of the USSR. So I'm sure Michael knows it, or else he lived under a rock. But they were extremely big, and I remember this too. This was in 1979. They gave a concert. Sopot has this international music festival, or at least used to, every year. And it was broadcast throughout the Eastern Bloc. Like you probably heard of Eurovision, which is a scrappy European festival they have. This is Intravision. Intravision was like the Soviet-like version of Eurovision. So this was seen in the Soviet Union, in Bulgaria, all the important ports of call, basically. So it was like a subset. Hermann Goering, Prince, and this I have to research. I don't know what he was doing there, but I didn't have the time to research this. And finally, Vlad the Impaler. And Vlad the Impaler stayed here on the night of August 31st, 2009. He was invited to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II. This was 2009. So August 31st, he slept there. Then on September 1st, he woke up, shaved, washed, maybe did other things. And then he went out on the pier that you saw, and he had a nice conversation, 30-minute conversation with the prime minister. This is on the right, that's Prime Minister Donald Tusk. He was a prime minister then, and he is one again. He's like reprising his role. He's prime minister today. And if you are a right-wing conspiracy nut in Poland, the question you are asking yourself now is, what did they talk about? What did these two talk about? And there are many variations. One says that Putin proposed to Tusk to partition Ukraine between Poland and Russia. I don't know if that's true. It sounds nonsensical. But the consensus among the, what do you call that? the crazies, is that they actually conspired to kill this man. This was the president of Poland at the time, and they, they were sort of at loggerheads. They were from different political parties, and so they definitely wanted to kill him. And the reason they know this is because no more than 6 months later, the presidential plane crashed in Smolensk, Russia, killing everyone on board, which was due to pilot error and just horrible weather. But that, of course, facts should not obscure a good conspiracy theory. So this went, this launched like a 12-year probe by Parliament. I mean, Benghazi is nothing. We have nothing here. I mean, they actually took another plane and exploded it. Another Tupolev 154, which was a Soviet plane. This was like the hugest conspiracy theory, and many people still believe that Putin and Tusk killed Kaczynski. That's his name, Lech Kaczynski, the president. Okay, I don't know what I have next. Oh, okay, this is when I stepped down from the drone. This is a city hall, which is in Sopot, which looks the way it always looked, except if you see in the back, it says, Sopot is in solidarity with Ukraine and the Free Belarus. I don't know if you can see it since you don't see the whole slide. They also rebuilt the train station. This is what it looked like when it opened in the early 70s. By the late 80s, it was like this. It was really, really deteriorated quite a bit. And now they built this thing. I mean, it's like this super duper train station / shopping mall / office complex, This is what it looks like on the inside. It reminds me of Kyoto, Japan. That's the place where I saw something similar, where train stations have sort of a hybrid purpose. So there's a train station, but there's also like other functionalities that are built on top of it. So that's kind of, what reminds me of Kyoto, I guess. Okay, now this is Sopot, and now I travel down to Torun, where my aunt lives. And now we're kind of zooming out a little bit. So now I can point out to you that I really could see Russia from my house. See, right over there. Now Torun is famous primarily for Copernicus. It's the birthplace of Nicholas Copernicus. This is the Copernicus house. There's a Copernicus museum, which I went into. So they have like this little globe, and here you could, on the touch screen, find out all the different places where they made astronomical measurements, like Stonehenge. And of course, I forget all the other ones. I remember Stonehenge, but there were several. Then they had a room with like all the different telescopes and protractors and God knows what. I mean, most of it has very little to do with Copernicus, really, right? I mean, it's sort of generic. Here is, I guess, a copy of, I think it's the original publication of the movement of the celestial bodies. I forget the exact title of it, right? It looks pretty well preserved. I don't know if it's the original. I mean, this was 1472. When was it published? Late 1400s. Here is, again, in Torun, this is a monument of Copernicus, and you see City Hall in the back, very, very ancient. It's still City Hall. So, as you know, Copernicus was censured by the Roman Catholic Church for his heresy, and he didn't see his work published until his deathbed, basically. I think that's where he first saw it. Few people noticed, but he was also thrown out of the Republican Party. The Republicans really didn't like, what Copernicus was doing. Well, I'm getting like incredulous looks. He didn't like it. Slightly different than the church. The Republicans had problems with gravity. You see, these are pre-Newtonian times. Gravity had not yet been invented. And so the Republicans could not figure out why one celestial body would move in circles around another, or ellipses, let alone an ellipse. So that was their problem. And my last slide. So you say, okay, Torun, you have science, Copernicus, astronomy. Does Torun have something that's just the opposite? Yes, they do. This is my final slide. This is Radio Maria. And I'm sure Greg will Google it as we speak. This is a radio and TV Catholic broadcaster. They started in about, I think, mid-1990s. They spew basically hateful propaganda of all sorts. Last but not least, dog whistle anti-Semitism. In Poland, you dog whistle anti-Semitism, just like here we dog whistle racism, right? You never express it directly. You kind of, you hint at it. And, they've been very successful. The previous right-wing government actually gave them subsidies to do stuff. And the European Commission said, "Whoa, no, no, you can't do that." This is a church, facility, right? The state can't really contribute to it. Generally, I mean, the European Union it kept Poland potty trained for most of this time. When shit really got bad, they would step in, and sometimes the United States would step in too, when they were about to pass really, really stupid legislation. And so this is my last slide. So what have you learned? I recall Jerry. Remember Jerry Springer? What have we learned? So what have I learned is that in the post-communist period, the country has evolved. To my taste, it's evolving too slowly. I mean, a new railway station in 30 years is a bit too slow in terms of, if you compare especially how the Pacific Rim developed since the early 90s, China, Singapore, Taiwan, Korea. I mean, Korea is the new Japan, right? Poland isn't that. I mean, but it is improving. It still has problems. The healthcare system is in shambles. It is a public healthcare system, but they spend way too little as percentage of GDP on it. And I actually, 5 years ago, I had the displeasure of interacting with it. So I know that it's in shambles. What?
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah. Or should I stop share?
Yeah, that one should let you see everybody.
Okay. Oh, all right. They're, as far as like LGBT rights, they are not the most tolerant people, unfortunately. I mean, they don't kill gay people if anything, but they're not too welcoming. Again, though, the European Union will probably pull them in, kicking and screaming at some point. But you know what? Even though the progress is slow, you do sense progress. Like when I was driving on the freeway, and well, I lost my pictures, but I also wished I brought a dash cam camera to film as I was driving. You see tons and tons of wind turbines everywhere. Like you drive through, the countryside, and they have quite a few of them. And so it's a place that's moving forward, albeit slowly. One thing I did not see are homeless encampments, people living under tarp, next to shopping carts in tents. I did not see that. I see it in this country. And so when you come back here, you become you come back a bit demoralized, because here you have Poland, obviously a country that was communist, that everybody was fleeing from. They've met strides forward, whereas our country is moving backwards. I mean, I'm sorry, the fact that people live in shopping carts, if you cannot take care of your most vulnerable, you are moving backwards. I mean, I don't care how much money Elon Musk might have. That's irrelevant. So, and of course, this country is still wealthier in terms of per capita GDP. It's much wealthier than Poland is. That's not my comparison. It's a trajectory. It's a trajectory that you see. There it's on its way up. Maybe not as quickly as I would personally like, but here we are kind of an empire in decline. So that's my final thought of the afternoon.
So the first question that came to my mind while you were talking is the Baltic cold?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially where I lived, the Vistula River, which is the main river in Poland, empties into the Bay of Gdańsk. When I was little, my parents made me swim in that thing. I remember it was 18 degrees Celsius, which was way too cold for me. Fortunately, towards the end of the 70s, it became so polluted that they closed the beach. So my folks no longer could force me to swim there, but it was cold.
It's
Yes.
an ill wind that blows no good.
Yeah.
Les.
So because of World War II, you had both the Russians come in and invade and the Nazis as well.
Mhm.
And just what did that do to the population, and how much destruction was there from World War II? And then did the being under the thumb of the Russian Empire also after World War II, did that, put the brakes on, keep it from recovering, or how did that go?
Yeah. I mean, that's the a tendency you saw immediately after the war, that even though Poland did rebuild and other countries did rebuild, Hungary and so forth, the rate of growth was just so much, slower than that of the West. And you saw this, chasm basically opening up in terms of, economic growth. As far as destruction, actually, this is an interesting question you asked. Let's see if I can bring my previous slides up to, no, I can't. I cannot, because anyway, the place where I grew up, Sopot and Gdańsk, before the war, that was part of what was known as the Free City of Gdańsk, which was established by the League of Nations. It's kind of like what Hong Kong used to be to China, right? And the predominant percentage of the population there was German. Like Sopot before the war was called Sopot, spelled with a Z and two P's. It was predominantly German. All the streets names were German. I actually you find historical stuff on that. It's interesting. Gdańsk was also German. Danzig is usually the name the Germans use, right? And they were thrown out, all of them. The Russians came in, and the Germans now lost it for good. And they lost Eastern Prussia too. So now it's all Polish. So people who live there are people from somewhere else, and I think that also influences the politics in the place, because this is, to use the American terminology, like the bluest place in Poland. I mean, Sopot especially, Sopot is also the wealthiest in terms of per capita income, and is the bluest. I mean, they vote like they're like San Francisco or Upper West Side of Manhattan or something. Not as wealthy, but it's a very different. It seems that when you go to places where people have moved from somewhere else, they tend to be maybe more liberal, because I guess they depend on others for assistance. Because they're in a new place, fish out of water kind of situation. So this repeats itself in Polish politics, because there was a big resettlement after the war, from the east to the west, right? Because Stalin took part of Poland in the east, and people moved to the west, which used to be Germany. And to this day, you see a different political outcome. The people in the West will vote more liberal, more blue, even though they came from the East. So they were like the most primitive yokels you can imagine, right? Because the further east you go, the more funky it gets. And yet they moved over, and now you see a totally different political alignment. It's actually very interesting. Destruction, yeah, Gdańsk was actually destroyed fairly significantly, but it was rebuilt. Warsaw obviously was just totally pummeled, pulverized. And it was rebuilt gradually. No, but if they had a capitalist economy, that would have gone much quicker.
Okay, Dana.
Or Jerry, Dan,
Is Poland, or how long has Poland been? Is Poland a member of what's left of NATO?
Yes. I like that. I like where it took it. Yeah, it is. Yeah, Poland joined NATO in 1999. It was the first wave of expansion. So it was like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary. That might have been it, actually. And then later, George Bush W included Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and thank God. Can you imagine what they would look like now? Yeah.
Who's the European Union?
European Union was 2004. They had a referendum and everything. So that,
Are they using the euro?
No, they're not using the euro. I would argue correctly, given what happened with Greece, as you remember, they are using the euro, and they shouldn't be. Their economy is not integrated with Northern Europe's. But what the Poles do use is truckloads and truckloads of EU money to build the infrastructure. So most of the stuff I showed you was paid for by the European Union, which primarily means the Germans, and the French, but mostly the Germans. I mean, the freeway system is very nice. Now they have these toll roads everywhere. None of that was there before, none of it. And it's really quite nice, but a lot of it is from Western Europe.
Okay, one.
So is this a market then for European goods? Poland and that area?
More and more so,
Uh-huh.
more and more so. I was changing planes in Frankfurt, and I found my gate to go to Gdańsk, and I noticed how many different shitholes in Poland you can fly nonstop from Frankfurt, which to me that's probably the biggest indicator. It means people have enough money in Bydgoszcz, or like towns you haven't even heard of, have nonstop flights from Frankfurt, Germany. To me, that's like the biggest indicator, because it's very objective, right? The airlines are making money on it. So more and more so.
So haben Sie Deutsch gelernt an der Schule?
I don't speak German. No, I'm sorry. Kind of Dutch.
But there's a meeting between Putin and the not yet president of Poland, did he speak Russian?
Oh, that was actually interesting. They asked them what language do they speak, right?
Yeah.
And apparently they spoke a combination of broken German.
Ah.
Because Tusk, by the way, if you're on the political right, Tusk is a Nazi, and you know why? Because his grandfather was in the Wehrmacht during the war. So clearly, Tusk is also a Nazi, right? That's like the birther thing, Polish edition, right? So maybe he knew some broken German. Of course, Putin was KGB. He was stationed, I think, in Leipzig or Dresden, so he knew German. So apparently, the conversation about partitioning Ukraine took place in broken German.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jerry, your turn.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I really agree with you about the homeless situation. That in any country that has homeless, it's a bad thing. The other thing I want to say is that when I learned the history of World War II, my understanding was it started with a German attack going across the land border and into where there was a post office. I assume you're correct that it really started on the Baltic. Do you know what the difference in time was between those two places?
Actually, the post office you mentioned is also Gdańsk. It's not far from Westerplatte. And there were, fierce battles. I know Westerplatte held out for 7 days. They managed to keep the Germans at bay for 7 days. The post office is also a famous place where they had, major pitched battles going on. I think they think it's first because they attacked like at 4 a.m. And I think maybe along the western border, maybe it was a little bit later. I don't know why it's assumed, but Gdańsk is always assumed to be sort of the place where World War II started, which I actually disagree with. But that's but you know me, guys. I always have contrary opinions. But as far as the invasion of Poland, that always is thought to be the initial place.
So where do you think it was started?
I think it started on September 18th, 1931, when Japan attacked Manchuria.
Oh, okay. I agree with that. Yeah.
Michael.
Thank you. Them very interesting. Regarding when the war started in Poland, you can refresh my memory if I am wrong, but it was a German provocation on Polish radio station that Germans used as pretext for invasion, right?
I have no clue, actually. I've never heard of this.
But anyway, Sopot I remember as the place of these festivals, something.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
so you know Boney M, right, Michael? You must have remembered Boney M. Brezhnev loved them.
Well, I mostly lived under the rock, but I heard this name at least.
Okay.
But we used to watch this Sopot festivals always because they always had at least some good stuff there.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you about, so I understand why the Poles like Copernicus, but why did they have so fond feelings for de Gaulle? What it was so special about de Gaulle that?
I'm sorry, fond feelings for what?
De Gaulle, the French.
Well, he was a member of the French resistance, right? He was one of the allies, the liberators, right? And he was, I guess it would be similar as if Churchill traveled to Poland, right? It would be something similar, right?
I see.
It was only recently that they discovered that, in fact, he really pushed for the Allied invasion to go through Normandy, so that his beloved La France would be liberated, because Churchill wanted to attack through the Balkans, right, through the underbelly of Europe, which would have driven a wedge between Nazis, but also the Soviets, which Churchill knew were a problem. FDR was a drooling idiot by that point. I don't think he knew where he was. De Gaulle knew what was going on, and he still went for Normandy because it was good for him. So, but back then, of course, nobody knew this. This is actually fairly recent, like 10 years ago. Some French historian published a book on this. So
And I also wanted to ask, how is Polish economy doing? So, like the growth, economic growth, the situation with job market, and all this general economic well-being. What is your feeling?
you know, I haven't looked at the statistics. It is growing. Of course, I think it's growing at the same rate as neighboring countries, which is not enough. You know, the East European countries have to grow faster. They have to have, like, maybe not Chinese level of growth, but maybe Korean level of growth, because they're still poorer than Western Europe, right? And I think in the long run, that's politically untenable, right? It's like Alabama versus California. You know, if there were no transfer payments between the two, I mean, imagine if we didn't send money to Alabama, right? What the difference would be. So I mean, it looks wealthy, at least the places I went to, which was Toruń and Gdańsk. And Sopot, of course, is always wealthy, always has been. So that's not a very good indicator. I don't know exactly. I mean, I think they're doing fairly well, comparatively region-wise. Maybe a little better than Germany, because Germany has been struggling recently. But they need to do a lot more, unfortunately. And the European Union, and this is the bad thing about the European Union, their regulatory regime is just over the top. I mean, they you know, and Poland unfortunately has this combination of EU/communist legacy in terms of regulation. Although people tell me EU regulation is far worse than communist regulation. I've heard that on several occasions. But that really, you know, hinders growth. And you know, I don't know. I mean, that you know, the libertarian in me says this is something that then you really need to address. So,
Thank you.
Sandra.
Somebody muted me there. Okay, I wanted to ask about population. I thought you said at one point you said the population was and now it was less. And so I'm thinking about population in terms of the future of a country, and I heard a commentary on Ukraine the other day that the population was declining to such an extent that that might determine whether it was a sustainable state or not. So I thought we always hear about the immigrants who are rushing into those countries. So what's happening with the population?
well, actually, the situation is very similar to the United States, Japan. Well, no, not Japan is like the worst. But you know, when I said I was mentioning the statistics for Sopot, that town where I grew up, it had like 50,000 and change when I was growing up, has 30,000 now. And you walk down the street and you see why there are no children. I mean, I'm sure there's some somewhere, but there are very few. Like the place where I was growing up, these blocks that I showed you, there was a playground there in the middle, and of course it was filled to the, you know, to the brim with children, including myself. This time, every time I'm there, I walk past it, it's empty. It is empty. And like I said, my elementary school is an old folks home, so you have the same sort of demographic change, right, that you see in this country. And you know, our social security system will explode. I don't know what that, you know, I think they have a similar thing where you defer, you know, a pension system. So this is going to be a big time bomb for everybody, like, you know, everybody, I think, in the West. As far as I mean, we at some point, I think Poland had something like 2 million Ukrainian refugees in a country of 38 million. I think some of them maybe moved to Germany, some moved back to Ukraine. I don't know how many are there now. I do know that, you know, when the EU was pushing Poland to accept more Muslims from Syria, because you really want those, Poland was actually able to push back on the proviso that they had 2 million Ukrainians. Okay, so they don't want to go to take anybody anymore, and that, you know, and at a risk of being racist, thank God.
Okay, Les? Sandra, you had your hand up. Do you get you? Yeah. You've been preempted.
Hi, I have a question. When did is it during the Waleka time that Poland joined the NATO? And what are the benefits for Poland to join NATO, to be a NATO member?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, as you may imagine, Poles are very sort of West obsessed, which is probably not to their own good always. So on day one in 89 and 90, they wanted to join both NATO and the European Union. They eventually did join NATO in 1999 and the EU in 2004. What benefit do they draw from NATO? Dana said, what remains of NATO? I am very skeptical of NATO. I think NATO is a piece of paper. That's my personal opinion. That if war broke out, NATO would declare war on paper. They would say, we are at war with you, Putin, and then they would go home. That's my opinion. But for the time being, it does provide a certain, credible deterrence, I suppose, against Russian aggression, right? Finland joined, Sweden joined. So, and now they're actually spending real money on defense. In a way, Trump did do them some good. They said, no, you guys have to finance your own defense. So, because the Europeans were free riding on America since, the end of World War II. I mean, really. So, they are spending more money. Will this translate into actual willpower of, let's say, engaging the Russians in Ukraine, which I think they should have done at the beginning? I don't know. But I have like Dana. I mean, when I think of NATO, I'm not exactly sure, what they would actually do. They've never actually fought a war, right? They had troops in Bosnia at one point. They went to Afghanistan. NATO invaded Afghanistan after 9. That's the extent of their experience as a military alliance, right? So I don't know.
Do you think the European members of NATO, France, Germany, and so on, would defend Poland?
No.
Okay, Liz.
So I looked it up, and the birth rate of women, birth rate, obviously, 1.16 per woman, and 2.1 is the replacement rate,
Right.
which is just the quote unquote worst or best, depending how you look at it, in Europe.
I thought it was like 1.6. Wow.
1.16.
1.16. My goodness.
Yeah, which is just
Yeah.
amazingly low. Also, I have a question. Are there any Jews left in Poland, percentage-wise? What is it down to? And
Oh.
then what is left of anti-Semitism in Poland?
Mm-hmm. So let's see. What your first question was about? Well, the birth rate. Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, one thing that can ameliorate this is immigration, and I'm a rabid racist, as you know. So there are some places from which I would welcome immigrants, and other places where I would not. But it's definitely an opportunity there. I mean, Japan is the extreme case. And they're very hostile towards immigrants, right? They have a big superiority complex. So they will be in the toilet much earlier than we will. As far as Jews, it was always thought that at the end of World War II, there were 3,000 Jews left. That's actually the figure that Steven Spielberg showed at the end of Schindler's List. That's the figure I always grew up with. But, they say the figure was more like 75,000 maybe. And people do come out of the closet. Not like gay people here, Jewish people. They're Jewish or half Jewish. You actually learn more and more, about people who, after the war, basically went to ground. They were, so traumatized by it, they basically either converted to Catholicism, at least on paper, So there are probably more Jews that we know there are. Anti-Semitism is like this. It's like this dog whistle. It's there, but it's not direct. It's something in a way that people are afraid to talk about. If you tell a right-wing politician they're anti-Semitic, they will bristle at it. They, just like telling, I guess, I don't know, Strom Thurmond that he's a racist. He'll probably say, no, no, of course not. So it's probably that sort of reaction. Actually, I visited in Sopot, there's a Jewish cemetery that I visited, which I've never visited all my life. I knew it was there. I always knew it was there. I just never paid attention to it. And it wasn't anti-Semitic. It was just, it was just there. And this time I visited, and actually I want to give a talk about it. And that's a much heavier talk than this one.
Were the graves stepped up?
No. In a big, and you'll see, I mean, it shocked me. I started crying when I went in there.
Michael.
It's a brief comment why Poland wants to be in Europe and to be with the West, because it has a history with communism, and with the Soviets. And it starts from actually it starts much earlier, but even during the World War II, there was, maybe Zem could correct my pronunciation, there was Armia Krayova and Armia Ludova.
Yes.
And Armia Krayova, they were against Germans, and they had a big revolt in Warsaw that was suppressed.
Yeah.
And the Soviets, although they could support them, who participated in this revolt, they did nothing.
Right.
And Armia Ludova, it was more like communist oriented.
Right.
And it took power after the World War II, and many Poles were very unhappy with this.
True.
And there was another insurrection in Poland about 1956, I believe. And then there was this huge solidarity movement, that
Right.
was Solidarność. That was probably the first mass movement against socialism in any of the Eastern Bloc countries. So the Poles have many reasons to be safe with the West. And why they joined NATO, it's obvious. Because for the whole duration of the NATO, none of the NATO members was attacked.
Yeah.
Never, ever.
Right.
We don't know what would happen, how the Article 5 would be really used, but it never happened. So as a deterrent, the NATO membership was very effective always. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Jerry.
Yeah, I want to respond to your comment that the France and England would not would not go to war over Poland. Poland was attacked. Well, when I think about the Third Reich, you know, they invaded the Sudetenland, no problem. They invaded Austria, no problem. They invaded Poland, and then England and France declared war on Germany at that point. So why do you think that they wouldn't come to Poland's defense now?
Because they didn't then. I don't think France even declared war. Great Britain did. Her Majesty's government did, and they said sent some soldiers to Dunkirk, from which they could clearly observe the developments on the Eastern Front. I mean, it was a sick joke, and I think that's what NATO will be. They will declare war. They will, meet in Brussels and hobnob and say, "Oh yes, we declare war on Russia," and that will be the end of it. Declaring war to me is a formality, as opposed to going to war. So no, France and Germany did not defend Poland in 1939, not by any stretch of the imagination. Hence my skepticism.
Well, they did go to fight the Germans on the western front of Germany. So
where?
Huh?
Where?
Well, they lost big time, but yeah, they weren't prepared. But they did have a lot of soldiers out there. I don't know the details, but I mean, there were battles between the English and the German in Western Europe.
I can think of Dunkirk and nothing else.
Well, they
I
were
have to look that up. Maybe you're correct, Jerry. I'm not a. I don't know what I don't know.
They had to retreat to Dunkirk and then go back to England, but they were pretty unsuccessful. That's for sure. But they made an effort, and it wasn't just Dunkirk. They didn't get very far. They certainly didn't get to Germany until 1944.
Okay, Misuma.
I'm assuming after the Industrial Revolution, not just the Western Europe, Eastern Europe also joined the Industrial Revolution. So during the Waleka period, what is even now today is the GDP index in Poland to show that Poland has joined the Industrial Revolution, and then but I'm a little bit confused when it showed some of the buildings and all this stuff, but that's in Warsaw. How about across the country? How did that improve not only the GDP index, but also the people's life.
Yeah, I should probably know more about GDP because I keep talking about it, but I don't know the exact number, you know. I do know that during the financial crisis in 2008, Poland was the only country that actually continued to grow. It didn't have a recession. In fact, when Putin met with Tusk, apparently he congratulated him on this fact that, you know, Poland was doing so well. So let's partition Ukraine. You know, you guys are doing so well, you know, why not? I actually, when I was driving to Toruń, I actually lost my way, you know, and I drove through the countryside, and it's, you know, you see a lot of new buildings. You kind of see the road is actually not very good. You know, you didn't see any horses anymore, horse-drawn, you know, farm equipment. It was all tractors. It was all mechanized, and you know, it had room for improvement. But then again, I drove through rural America. I don't know if you guys have, and there isn't much of a difference. So yeah, I mean, this was in Warsaw, but yeah, Warsaw would look similar to this. Yeah, yeah.
How's your Polish, by the way? Were you able to make yourself understood everywhere in
Actually,
Poland?
pretty good. That's pretty good. Sometimes I'm at a loss for words, but that's true in English as well. So I speak, you know, I speak both languages, maybe not poorly, but you know.
You get by in English.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
Now, I had another question. When you were talking about de Gaulle visiting Poland,
the what?
when you talked about de Gaulle visiting Poland, I was wondering if that was about the time he asked NATO to get out of France.
Yes, yes. That was. I think it was the same year, 1967. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I kind of remember that because there was talk that should we let them kick us out of France? And I thought, what's ridiculous? They're their own country, right? I mean,
Mhm. And I still have to find out what Prince was doing in Suffolk. That's, to my knowledge, I don't think he gave a concert. Maybe he did, and I don't know about it. In which case, I feel ashamed. But
maybe there's a good tailor in Poland that he did.
I don't know.
Carl, me.
Yeah, focus camera on me. I just want to know, because my wife and I were talking about your talk this morning. What age were you when you came here?
Initially, I left Poland at the age of 13, but then in the late 1980s, I went back for 3 years. And I studied at the Technical University where I learned my double E. I also actually had a chance to work at Solidarność. They used to be my employer for a year. I was a translator, so I worked there for a year. And then I came back stateside to continue my education. And since then, this was 1990 that I came back. And I stayed since then. I mean, I visited every once in a while, but yeah.
Okay, no more questions? Okay, yeah, I think it might be because a lot of people couldn't find here and wanted to come here in person.
Yeah, I'm sorry you can't put the camera on myself very well, but that's okay. It was another thing. One of my best friends was his parents were from Germany, and he used to go back there to visit Poland because the Polish were, because they live real near that border between Germany and Poland. And man, you were either a solid German or a solid Pole. There was nobody in between when he used to go, and it's maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's what he told me,
Mhm,
you know.
mhm.
And of course, he did speak German. He
Mhm,
spoke pretty well. But now what's happening, guess what, is all of his cousins are dying, right? So
Yeah.
he's dead, by the way, too.
I mean, these days, Germany is by far the most important economic partner for Poland for both imports and exports. So, you know, I think the misfortune is that they don't speak a Slavic language. They should really learn because I can't understand them when they speak. You know, I think this is the curse of Europe, basically. You know, people don't understand each other and they kept fighting each other. You know, if just everybody learned to speak Polish, I think we would be fine, or maybe English as a fallback. You know, but you know, I sometimes, you know, when I went there, my mom has like a cable TV, and you could turn on like Deutsche Welle and other things. You could watch, you know, a debate in the Bundestag, and I didn't understand a word. I guess these days you have the AI transcription. So now I guess if they're planning to invade Poland, I'll hear about it or at least read about it. and, in the chyrons. But I think that's a big problem, actually, lack of understanding.
It used to be in most of the towns in northern New Jersey, around New York, people spoke 2 or 3 languages. Masuma.
Is Poland a Catholic country or Orthodox Christian? Like what the Byzantine Empire went through Poland to Soviet Union, or they just never went to, so it's not a part of Constantinople Christianity?
It's Catholic, but it's sort of borderline Catholic.
It's
I don't mean that in a psychiatric sense. I mean that the countries east of Poland are Orthodox, like Ukraine, Belarus, Russia. That's sort of the border. Oh, my mom told me something interesting, that apparently churches in Poland are emptying out, which struck me. I thought Poland was the last line of defense, because Ireland was Catholic, but then they had these sex scandals, and so they imploded. There are a few scandals in Poland. Maybe, hopefully, there'll be more. So maybe they'll implode too. So then I asked, okay, people don't go to church. How do they identify? If you ask them, ask a person, are you Catholic? And she said most people would say they're Catholic. So I guess it's a cultural thing. It's that's sort of saying, okay, I'm a normal Polish person, but not. I mean, that it's sort of just a name, like spiritual but not religious. Which drives me nuts in this country. I don't know what that means. So it's one of those things. But apparently, it is actually on the downswing. The church attendance, which I thought it had to be because of all the contact with the West. People travel all the time. That wasn't going to hold. But it surprises me it took this long. But it's happening.
What percentage of the Polish Jewish population is of Ashkenazi Jews?
Of what?
You call Ashken.
Yeah, it's Ashkenazi. Yeah, I think it's pretty much 100%. Yeah, maybe some Sephardic Jews found their way there through, I don't know, Turkey or something. But it's primarily Ashkenazi. Yeah.
Okay, Dana.
What languages did you have to study in school? Russian or?
I left after 6th grade. I had to study Russian in 5th and 6th grade. So I can make out the letters, like the bukvy, and then if I can sound them out, I can often figure out what they're talking about. It is a Slavic language, but I've never really used it since then. I also took, as an extracurricular activity, English. A friend of mine says, hey, there's this lady who comes over, after hours, and she teaches English. So I took English from, I think, 1st grade through 6th grade. Yeah. And then I thought, God, I learned nothing. I remember coming to this country. And then I went to my first day of school, junior high school in Michigan. And I said, wow, I know a lot. I later realized that American teenagers have just an extremely poor vocabulary. So I did know a lot in relation to, I remember I got like a perfect score on a vocabulary test a few months later. Which no, wow, that's it's a funny story, but so yeah, it actually did help me, but I didn't think so at the time. I thought I learned nothing.
Yeah, thank you.
Where were you initially?
Initially, I was in Rochester Hills, which is a suburb of Detroit. I went to the same junior high school as Madonna, apparently, but she's older though. But then we moved to Troy, which is a little bit further south, which is where I went to high school.
Okay, Sandra.
Well, since you're discussing the educational system, and I know you have views on education, so what do you think about the educational system in Poland, and is it getting better or worse, or how does it compare to here?
I think it's still pretty bad, and by that I don't necessarily mean the economics of it, by the way people teach. And I know this by reading a book by Anne Applebaum that she wrote together with Donald Tusk, who spoke with Putin about partitioning Ukraine. They're good friends. And Applebaum has several books in Polish, by the way. And so she talks that she had 2 sons, and she sent them to school somewhere in Warsaw or whatever. And she said this was so very dogmatic. They lecture at you. They don't encourage sort of intellectual interactions. They don't ask pupils, so what do you think? Is this important? Is this not important? Which that was actually when I came to America, I thought that was very nice, a nice change, that they actually talk to you, with you, and not just at you. And she said she couldn't take it, and she sent her kids to Great Britain somewhere. So by her story, and I assume she sent her boys to some fairly elite school, she's freaking Anne Applebaum, you know, and so if she couldn't make a go of it, I assume that this is still a problem. That's a mentality problem, right? That's a sort of a, you know, maybe the way people relate to one another generally. I have a stereotype of Germany as being very similar in that regard. That it's sort of this Ordnung, you know, and you come in and they give you this, you know, prepackaged knowledge that you're supposed to know, and you know, and that's it. So in that sense, I would not recommend it, I guess, based on Anne Applebaum's book. But I like her. Yeah.
Suzette.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Zem, for your trip and all of this enlightenment as far as your recent visit to your home country. I think I'm just going to say, make a comment more than anything, and that is what you said about NATO and Trump wanting, probably demanding that the other countries do their fair share as far as contributing. We told ourselves after we dropped the 2 nuclear weapons on the innocent people of Japan during World War II that we were the superpower. And I'm not saying that Europe shouldn't have been more involved in arming themselves and protecting themselves, even against us, but we didn't want them to. So, you know, we still declare ourselves the superpower, although that's fading very fast now. China is more of a superpower than we are at this point. But anyway, that's my comment. Yeah, it was horrible what he said, and shame on Europe. I don't necessarily disagree with the premise of his argument, but shame on Europe and the other countries of the world for not protecting themselves, even against a superpower such as us.
Shame on, you know, I don't know what Putin and Trump did. I don't watch the news. Did he give Putin the Sudetenland? I mean, what happened?
No, he didn't. They didn't do anything. It was all photo ops.
Okay.
It was nothing but praising Putin. He applauded him when he got off the plane while he waited for him. It was the most pathetic sellout on the American taxpayer. Again, Putin came away the strong guy, not Trump. It's just the most sickening, traitorous crap I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. No.
And the
Trump
media refuses to call it what it is. They are doing nothing but enabling this. They are doing nothing but what is the word? Oh gosh darn it. It's just we are really in a bad place. Really bad place. They're normalizing. They're normalizing all of this. This is not normal.
Yeah. I can play devil's advocate though and ask you, how was the Biden's administration's policy any different? Biden doesn't do stupid
Biden's not in
stunts.
office. Zem, Biden is not in office. We're talking
But
about
he was.
this president.
Putin invaded Ukraine where Biden was in office. What did he do? Nothing. So Trump makes stupid PR stunts and he's nauseating to look at. But, you know, is he really that different? Are the Dems really that different? And I would argue
I'm not saying that the Dems have caused this whole situation to begin with. They are more responsible than the Republicans based on the lack of policies that they have offered the American working class. I don't disagree with that. Don't disagree with that at all.
No, I totally agree.
In fact, I come down harder on the Dems than I do Republican.
Yeah, so do I. And for the same reason, well, Suzette, we're on the same page.
Yes, exactly.
On some level, Suzette and I, we usually disagree, but on this, I think on this point, we do agree. Yeah, wholeheartedly.
Yep.
Okay. So I did want to make a comment about an earlier statement. We knew that the Poles were Catholic because they use the Roman alphabet instead of the Cyrillic alphabet.
I guess it kind of correlates, right? Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond regarding this meeting between Trump and Putin, although it's not directly related to this, but I follow this development pretty closely for understandable reasons. I don't know what media you're following, because my take is that the most mainstream media actually describe this meeting like you did, that this is a kind of legalization for Putin's regime, at least how it looks, and it's a propaganda victory for Putin. But at the same time, I'm not so pessimistic, because it could be worse. And Putin did not get what I think he hoped from this meeting, because ultimately the issue is back to who really can solve it, and this is Ukraine and Europeans. So the ultimate fate of Ukraine, it is up to them, not to Putin, and maybe at this point even not so much to Trump. And so if this is the outcome that will be realized, we'll see what happens. But as a publicity stunt, of course, this meeting, it has very bad optics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now you reminded me one other thing that sort of bothered me about Poland, but actually most other countries in the region, that after 35 years, Poland does not have its own nuclear arsenal. I found that unthinkable. You know, Charles de Gaulle, when he visited, France already had their own suitcase, their own football, right? Why? Because he understood that the United States will never sacrifice New York for Paris.
Right.
There's no such thing as a nuclear umbrella. A third country with nuclear weapons will not come in and defend you because they'll receive a response from the other nuclear power. You have to have your own. You have to roll your own. Yes, yeah. Ask Gaddafi, you know, Saddam Hussein, you know. North Koreans are smart enough. They're never giving that up, you know. So anywho.
Sandra.
So I'm wondering whether we imagine that Trump intended to actually end the Ukraine war, since we know that Trump is only interested in Trump, and we know that he's trying to build a case that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. It doesn't matter whether Putin makes any offers for peace if Trump is seen to be working on peace. In his mind, then, that was a success. Is that not right?
I mean, Yasser Arafat got a peace prize, so I think anybody, all of us in this room could get one, and yeah.
Ed?
Just to talk about what Mr. Trump's motivation is with all this, is he would like, right now, we have to have forces all over the planet. And he's trying to, I believe, just try to concentrate on one or two theaters and trying to take things off the table.
Mhm.
He's trying to, the Middle East is a big area, and Ukraine is, or Europe's a big area too. And that's why he's getting NATO involved and saying, hey, why don't you guys take care of your own security? And, you know, Iran wants to be a big power there and to try to put them back in their box.
It's a mess. I think we're already in World War III. I mean, like I thought, you know, World War II started in Manchuria. I think it's already running. That's my opinion. You don't have the full conflagration yet that you had, you know, starting with Poland and then Western Europe, right? That's when it really exploded. And well, actually, that's very Eurocentric. The war in Asia was very brutal, what the Japanese did, starting in 1931, and you know the other places they invaded. I am, I guess, a bit Eurocentric here. You know, we probably don't know enough about the Pacific theater of war.
I remember through high school, when you studied history, you studied American and European history, and that was pretty much it.
And there was like ancient Egypt, Greece, then the Renaissance. There was
Yeah,
there
yeah.
were like these.
I should say Western European.
Oh, of course, of course. Yeah.
Michael.
Well, I admit that I cannot read Trump's mind, but forgive me for quoting him. There is no deal until there is a deal. So we don't know how this all will end. But my take is that the Europeans and Ukraine, of course, they should stop hoping for Trump and hope for themselves and for each
Yeah.
other. And that would be the best strategy. And so to return to our today's topic, Zem, what is your take on the state of Polish military? So how well the Poland is prepared if something happens, how well it is armed, and what
Yeah.
do you have any take on this?
Yeah. I mean, Poland right now is spending like something like 5% of GDP on the military, which is insane. You remember, not until very recently, the NATO target was 2%, and Poland was one of the few countries that actually met that target. The US was spending 3.5%, which I thought is insane. Now Poland is spending 5%. They recently signed a contract for 96 Apache helicopters. Apparently Boeing owns this franchise now. I'm afraid if the rotors will not come off, I hope that they fly, but I mean, Russia is such a bigger country territorially than any European country. Without nuclear weapons, I don't think you have a chance at deterrence, unfortunately. You will have a battle, a pitched battle, but I don't think, even with the equipment they're getting, I don't know. Russia always overwhelmed people just by its sheer size, kind of like China did too, in the East, right? So, they are spending a lot of money, but not on nukes, I don't think. If they do, I hope they do what they didn't tell me.
But Ukraine, of course, Ukraine is a bigger country, but it shows that even without nukes, it can deter the Russian invasion for at least for years.
Yeah.
And
But Michael, do you think that maybe Putin actually is throttling it back? Because he actually wasn't sure how the West would react. So he's kind of, dripping, it's kind of a drip, like he's dropping some bombs, some drones. I think he could go, he could become much more serious and much more aggressive. But he doesn't know how the West will react. So he's kind of playing,
to some degree, initially, maybe, but I don't think that this is still the case for now. But I wanted to ask you about the Polish military. So how, well, Apache helicopters, it's 30 years ago, it could be.
Right.
But how they are doing in terms of like more modern military systems, like drones, missile interceptors, and all this, what could be really needed in the modern war.
They do have F-35 fighter jets now. I don't know how many, but in terms of missile interceptors, what really pissed me off in recent years is that the Russians would fire these projectiles into Poland. There was like one cruise missile that flew in like maybe 80 kilometers, turned around, and flew back out. There was a Belarusian helicopter that flew in over the border. Why that wasn't shut down immediately, I don't know. I mean, did they not have the capacity? You can't stuff like that slip by. You really can't. One actually flew in and actually landed all the way near Toruń, where I visited, near Copernicus, in that area. So that's what, maybe like 400 kilometers from the border, So the Russians are always, it's kind of like the Berlin airlift. I guess Stalin described it as poking the West with a bayonet, kind of just trying out, let's see what I can get away with, And, the Russians / Soviets, tomato, that's what they do. And you have to respond. And I'm disappointed if they don't. I don't know if it's because they don't have the capacity, the technological capacity. Although shooting down helicopters, I think that's been done for a while now. So I don't know. I really don't know.
Suzette.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Zem, on Russia poking the nearby countries and the borders and things. Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. It's so obvious. The other thing I wanted to make a comment on is one of the main reasons, if not maybe even the main reason why Trump wanted these other countries to arm themselves and not depend solely on us or on us a lot, is because the defense contractors in this country, that's where they're getting their weapons. They're buying them from us. We are selling these countries instead of giving them to them, or, it's no freebies. So it's a money deal. More than anything else, that's what it is.
But Suzette, I learned not too long ago how U.S. foreign military aid worked, and still works. They would send $1 billion to, say, Poland, and say, here, Poland, buy some arms, but they have to be made by American corporations.
Yep,
So
exactly.
it's the same military-industrial complex. It's structured differently, but it's actually not different from what happened before,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the people that, that fund the Republicans mostly, and the Democrats
And
too.
the Democrats, yeah.
They do both sides. So yeah, they got to keep the money going. Yeah.
Okay, one more question because I'm dry-mouthed.
Yeah.
Or if there are no questions, I will, I think, Suzette, do you have your,
Still.
that's a vestigial hand, okay.